She gave herself the name Ayne. I know this because I asked her, 3 days after the Border Patrol brought her in, what she wished to be called. She thought about it for a moment, not the way people think when they are deciding what to tell you, but the way people think when they are genuinely deciding, and then she said, "Ayne, I think it suits." I asked where it came from. "I chose it," she said. 3 years ago, it seemed like a good name for someone who didn't have one." This was said without drama, without self-pity, the way you say the window faces east or the road takes 2 days. I nodded and told her she would have a room in the East Wing, while the court determined her situation. She thanked me in the straightforward way of someone who is genuinely grateful and has no expectation beyond the immediate gesture. Then she went to the East Wing, and I went back to the council chamber, and my second Aldrich was waiting for me with the expression of a man who has been patient for a very long time and is about to stop being patient. "She has no pack marker," Aldrich said, "no territory mark, no bloodline record in any registry we've checked." "I know," I said. "The court is asking what we intend to do with her." "We intend to house her while we determine her situation," I said. Roarin, Aldrich had been my second for 11 years and had therefore earned a certain directness. "The court isn't asking about housing, they're asking about removal. A packless, nameless woman of unknown origin in the Alpha King's hold is a person," I said, "who arrived at the territory border alone and was brought in by my patrol, as the protocol requires." Aldrich was quiet for a moment. "The court will call for a dismissal hearing within the month," he said. "Then we have a month," I said, and that was the end of the conversation about that. The truth which I did not tell Aldrich was that I had felt something the morning the patrol brought her in. Not the bond, not yet, or not in the way that has a name. Something more like the feeling a key makes in a lock just before you know whether it will turn. A resistance, a click, a held breath. I had been standing at the upper hall window when they came through the main gate, and I had looked down, and she had looked up, not at me specifically, just at the building, cataloging it the way you catalog somewhere you might need to understand, and the thing in my chest had gone very still. My wolf, who was not a particularly communicative wolf on ordinary days, had pressed forward against my ribs with the unhurried certainty of an animal that has been waiting for a specific thing and recognizes it. I did not act on this. I had learned in 15 years of ruling CAERWYN that the things that matter most are not served by being acted on immediately. I watched instead. The court in those first days was not watching, the court was deciding. I use the word loosely. What the court was doing was more accurately described as concluding. They had reached a conclusion before they had gathered any evidence, and the subsequent activity was oriented toward justifying the conclusion rather than testing it. The conclusion was that AYNE was an inconvenience who needed to be managed out of CAERWYN as efficiently as possible, and the mechanism for this was the formal dismissal process. A hearing, a finding that she had no legitimate claim to territory residency, and a placement at one of the border settlements that existed precisely for people with no pack and no provenance. The border settlements were not unkind. I want to be clear about that. They were functional, adequately resourced, and managed by people who understood their purpose. They were also, in the hierarchy of the Wolfpack world, the end of the road, the place where possibility stopped. The court was proposing, in short, that AYNE, who had given herself a name and arrived at the border of CAERWYN with no explanation and no apology, should be placed where the road ended. I sat in the council chamber and heard the proposal and said, "The hearing will be scheduled for the new moon, not before." The new moon was 4 weeks away. Aldrich looked at me. "The matter requires proper consideration," I said. This was, as far as it went, true. I watched her in those 4 weeks with a specific attention. I gave things that mattered and that I had not yet understood. She was not hiding. This was the first thing that distinguished her from most people in a difficult situation. She was not trying to be invisible, nor was she performing visibility. She occupied whatever space she was in with the simple completeness of a person who has decided that she exists regardless of whether that fact is convenient for anyone, and that existing is sufficient. She walked the hold, not the main halls. She seemed instinctively to understand which spaces were politically charged and navigated around them. But the working parts, the kitchen garden, the stables, the path along the river that the hold's wolves used in the mornings. She was in the kitchen garden on the fourth day, helping one of the groundskeepers with a drainage problem she had apparently identified on her own, which the groundskeeper reported to me with the combination of gratitude and bewilderment of a man whose problem had been solved by someone who had no particular reason to solve it. The wolves of CARWYN found her on the sixth day. This I saw myself, because I was crossing the inner courtyard toward the stables when I heard the sound of wolves moving with purpose from the eastern run, not a hunt, not an alarm, the specific purposeful movement of animals going somewhere they have decided to go. They came through the courtyard gate and flowed past me and continued to the river path, and I followed at a distance. She was sitting on the stone bank, looking at the water. The wolves arranged themselves around her with the organized patience of an escort, some sitting, some lying, the older ones closest. She did not appear surprised. She looked at them with the same calm she gave everything, and then went back to looking at the river. She said to no one in particular, or possibly to the water, or possibly to the wolves, "Hello." The largest of the wolves, old Sir, who had been running the river path since before I took the throne, and who did not, as a rule, sit with anyone, laid his enormous head briefly on her knee. She looked down at him. Something crossed her face that was not the composure she usually showed, something underneath the composure, quick and warm and unguarded. Then it was gone, and she was composed again. I went back to the hold. That evening I told Aldrich to delay the dismissal hearing notification for 1 additional week, citing administrative backlog. Aldrich said nothing, which was its own kind of communication. By the second week I was attending to the matter with the focused intensity I usually reserved for border disputes and supply crises, because it had become clear to me that the situation was not what my court believed it was, and that acting on my court's belief would be a significant error. The evidence was, if I examined it honestly, mostly the wolves. The CARWYN wolves were old wolves. This territory had been wolf country for 400 years, and the pack that ran these hills and this river valley had the slow, considered quality of animals who had been paying attention for generations. They did not adopt strangers. They had not, in my 15-year memory, shown particular interest in anyone who was not of CARWYN. They had shown interest in AYNE on day 6, and maintained that interest consistently, which meant that either the CARWYN wolves had collectively developed an inexplicable fondness for a packless woman with no history, or they knew something. I trusted the wolves. The other evidence was the mate mark, which had begun the morning she arrived, and had been doing the steady warming thing ever since. Not the sudden ignition the stories described, but a slow and deliberate deepening, the way river water rises not dramatically but certainly, and you notice one day that the stones you were standing on are underwater. I was aware that this made my position in the dismissal proceeding complicated. I was also aware, sitting in my study on the 14th night with the mate mark warm at my wrist and the sounds of the river coming through the window, that I was not particularly concerned about the complication. I sought her out on the 15th day. Not officially. I did not send a summons or arrange a formal meeting. I went to the kitchen garden in the morning, where she was more often than not, and found her there pulling the season's last root vegetables with the methodical attention she brought to most physical tasks. She looked up when I came through the gate. She did not adjust her posture or her expression for my presence, which I had noticed she didn't, a quality so unusual in someone dealing with a king that I had spent several days determining whether it was rudeness, incapacity, or something else. It was something else. "Alpha King," she said, and went back to the roots. "Arorian is fine," I said. She considered this briefly. "All right." I crouched down at the far end of the row and began pulling on my side, which she received without comment, which told me she was the kind of person who accepted assistance when it was offered without making it a thing. We worked in silence for a few minutes. "The wolves," I said. "Old Sir doesn't sit with people." "I noticed," she said. "I don't know what to do about that." "Nothing," I said. "He'll make his own decisions." "He already has," she said, with a very small precision of dry humor that I had also noticed she deployed occasionally, in the specific gaps where wit earned its place. I pulled the last root from my end of the row. "The dismissal hearing is in 10 days. "I know," she said. "The court will recommend the border settlement." "I assumed they would," she said. There was no bitterness in it, no particular fear either that I could detect. She was simply noting the shape of her situation. "What would you have said if they had asked you," I said, "about where you come from?" She sat back on her heels and looked at me. The morning light was coming over the east wall of the garden, the low autumn light that catches everything at an angle and makes ordinary things look more considered than usual. She looked, in that light, like a person who was deciding how much of an honest thing to say. "I don't know where I come from," she said. "I know what I know. I've been moving east for 3 years. I know how to navigate by the river systems and how to treat a wolf's injured paw and how to read a drainage problem in a kitchen garden. I know my own name, which I gave myself, and I know that I belong somewhere in this territory." She paused. "I can't prove that last part. It's just I know." "How do you know?" I said. "The same way you know things before you have evidence for them," she said. "Something in me turned toward CAERWYN 3 years ago, and I've been walking toward it since." The mate mark at my wrist was warm. I covered it with my sleeve. 10 days, I said. "Stay in the garden." She looked at me with the slight tilt of someone who has understood more than was said. "All right," she said. I went back inside. The remaining 10 days had the quality of the last pages of a ledger that is almost full. Every entry felt weighted, the approach of the end of available space unmistakable. The court was preparing the dismissal with the efficient satisfaction of people who believe they are resolving a problem. The recommendation had been drafted, the border settlement notified, the administrative record prepared. Everything was in order, which was the condition my court valued above most things. AYNE spent those 10 days in the kitchen garden and along the river with the wolves. I know this because Aldrich reported it to me in the way he reported things he was uncertain about, with the specific neutrality of a man who suspects he does not have all the information. "The wolves are with her most of the day," he said, "on day 19. "Yes," I said. "Old Sir, and the river pack, and the 3 from the North Run who haven't been seen in the lower valley in 2 seasons. "I know," I said. "Roran," Aldrich said. "I know," I said again. "Trust me, Aldrich." He had served me for 11 years. He trusted me. He also, I was aware, trusted his own observations, which were telling him something that had not yet resolved into a conclusion but was building toward one. On the night before the hearing, I went to the archive. The CAERWYN archive was old, older than the current hold, older than most of the territory records. The oldest section dealt with the bloodline histories, the Moon Seal records, the documented recognitions. I had read the Moon Seal record once, when I first took the throne, as part of the standard orientation to CAERWYN's history. I read it again that night. The moon seal was older than Caerwyn as a named territory. It had been set in the Great Hall's floor by the founders, a bloodline seal, designed to recognize the true Luna of the founding line if she should ever present herself, regardless of what records or names or histories she carried. It worked on blood, not documentation. The pack's blood, the territory's oldest covenant. It had last activated 83 years ago, when the current founding line's last acknowledged Luna had died and the seal had gone dark. 83 years. The court had scheduled the dismissal hearing in the Great Hall. The Great Hall, where the moon seal was embedded in the stone floor, where everyone who entered crossed it. I sat in the archive for a long time. Then I went to bed and slept, which is the only practical thing to do when you have understood what is going to happen tomorrow and have decided to let it happen. The hearing was set for mid-morning. The Great Hall was full, the court, the senior pack members, the territory witnesses the dismissal protocol required. The hall had the specific quality of a room in which a conclusion has already been reached, and the proceedings are a formality, which is one of the least comfortable qualities a room can have. Awyne came in through the main doors. She had dressed for it. Not to perform. I understood that about her by now, but with the specific dignity of a person who believes that the moment deserves her best regardless of its outcome. She was in deep green, well-made, her dark hair simply arranged. She walked with her usual quality of occupying space without either shrinking or claiming it, straight-spined, unhurried. She crossed the threshold. She walked across the Great Hall floor, toward the dais where the hearing would be conducted, on the path that crossed the moon seal. And the moon seal blazed. I had been expecting it. I had been expecting it since the archive the night before, since the wolves on day 6, since the morning she arrived and my wolf pressed forward against my ribs with the certainty of old animals who recognize things. But expecting a thing and seeing it are not the same. The gold of it came up through the stone like something that had been waiting for a long time, and was not going to wait any more. Not the faint warm glow of something activating, but the full, unmistakable blaze of something that had gone dormant and was now awake. Every line and curve of the ancient seal lit from beneath, the light of it filling the hall, casting the particular quality of gold that has nothing to do with fire and everything to do with acknowledgement. Awyne stopped. She looked down at the seal, at her feet standing at its center, the gold rising around her, with the expression I had learned meant she was encountering something more than she had expected and was paying full attention. Then her wolf came. Not violently, not with the drama of stories, the great tearing emergence, the shock and spectacle. It came the way something comes when it has been waiting patiently for permission, with the ease of a thing returning to its natural state. The white of her shifted not all the way, not the full wolf, but the luminous silver white that in the old records is called the Luna light, the visible expression of the founding bloodline in the body of the true mate, undeniable and specific and 83 years overdue. The hall went completely silent. Every wolf in the room, every pack member who carried wolf blood, which was most of them, registered it the way wolves register things that are beyond argument, in the body before the mind, heads tilted. Something moved through the room like a wind that had no physical component. Old Sir, who had somehow gotten himself into the great hall in the confusion of the assembly, and was sitting at the back with the satisfied bearing of an animal who had known for 3 weeks and had been waiting for everyone else to catch up. Old Sir sat up very straight. The court was silent. I stood up. I had been in my place at the head of the room at the dais, watching. I stood up now and walked down from the dais, which was not what was supposed to happen. The protocol had me remaining seated until the proceedings were complete, and I crossed the great hall floor to where Awyne was standing at the center of the blazing moon seal. She looked at me. The Luna light around her was warm gold, steady, the kind of light that is its own argument. The mate mark at my wrist had stopped doing the warming river thing and had become something unmistakable, not a sensation exactly but an absolute fact, the way the ground is a fact. "Ayne," I said. "Yes," she said. "I have a proposal," I said. "It differs somewhat from the one the court was preparing." The very small precision of dry humor crossed her face. "I had noticed," she said. I took her hand. The mate mark blazed at both our wrists simultaneously, mine joining hers, the gold of both of them the same color as the seal at our feet. And the hall, already silent, became the specific silence of a room that has understood something and has no more questions about it. I turned to face the court. They were looking at the seal, at Ayne, at me, at the marks on our wrists. The senior council member, Lord Peen, who had been the most vocal proponent of the dismissal, and who was a man of genuine intelligence that he had, on this occasion, not applied well, was looking at the moon seal with the specific expression of someone revising their understanding of events fairly rapidly. "The dismissal hearing," I said, "is concluded. Ayne of Caerwyn of the founding line, as the seal has confirmed, will be remaining, as my Luna." The court bowed. Not because it was required. Because Ayne was standing at the center of the ancient moon seal, with the founding line's light around her and 83 years of waiting finally resolved, and some things are beyond argument. There was, afterward, the matter of her name. Not Ayne that she kept, because she had chosen it herself 3 years ago on a road she had been walking without knowing where it ended, and a name you choose for yourself is worth more than one assigned to you. But the full name, the territory name, the name that would go in the records, Ayne of Caerwyn, Luna of the founding line, mate of Roran. She received this information from the archive keeper the following morning with the same composure she gave everything, and then she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Ayne of Caerwyn." "Yes," the archive keeper said. "That's a good name," she said. And that was her response to the entirety of what had happened. I found her that afternoon on the river bank, old Sir beside her, the river pack spread along the stone, the light coming off the water in the particular way it came in autumn in this valley. She was looking at the river with the specific attention she gave things she was thinking through. I sat beside her. "The court," she said after a moment. "The court," I said, "is in the process of recalibrating." "Lord Peen," she said. "Lord Peen is a capable man who made an error in judgment," I said. "He will recover from it." "How quickly?" she said. "Approximately as quickly as the evidence makes it impossible not to," I said. The dry precision again. "That's honest." "You seem to appreciate honesty," I said. "I've had to," she said. "When you don't know your own history, honesty is the only currency you have that isn't borrowed." She was quiet for a moment. "The seal, the founding line, that means I've been here before, or someone who carried my blood has, that this territory was always where I was going." "Yes," I said. "I didn't know that," she said. "I just knew to walk east." "The blood knows things the memory doesn't," I said. "Is that something alphas are taught, or something you worked out?" "Worked out," I said, slowly. She looked at me then, with the full attention she gave important things. The river was moving behind her, old Sir's enormous head was on the stone beside her knee, and the mate mark at my wrist was warm in the way of things that have been confirmed rather than things that are still waiting. "You knew," she said, "before the seal." "I had a strong belief," I said, "based on available evidence." "The wolves." "Among other things," I said. "What other things?" I considered how to say this with the honesty she appreciated. "You walked into the kitchen garden and solved a drainage problem that had been going on for 2 seasons, I said, without being asked, without making it notable. As if solving problems that weren't yours to solve was simply what you did when you saw them. It was a simple fix, she said. Most things are simpler than people make them, I said, when you don't have a stake in the complication. She was quiet for a moment. That's also honest. You seem to appreciate it, I said. Old Sir made a sound that I had never heard him make in 15 years of running this valley, something between a sigh and a rumble, the sound of an animal who has completed a long assignment and is prepared to rest. Ayne looked at him. Something moved in her face that was the expression beneath the composure, quick and warm and real. "Hello," she said to him, in the same tone she had used the first time on the river bank, 3 weeks ago. He pressed his nose briefly to her hand. The formal mating rite was conducted at the new moon, 1 month after her arrival, in the great hall. The moon seal was lit again, not blazing as it had the day of the hearing, but the steady warm gold of something that has been recognized and is now continuous rather than waiting. The pack was assembled. The old words were said. The bond sealed in the way of CAERWYN's founding tradition, the marks at our wrists confirmed and recorded. Lord Peen, I noted, bowed as deeply as anyone. He was a capable man who had made an error. He had recovered from it, as I had said he would. Ayne received the rite with the composure she brought to everything, and the warmth underneath it that I was learning to read as clearly as the composure. When it was done, and the hall was full of the specific quality of a room that has witnessed something it was built to witness, she leaned slightly toward me and said, very quietly, "The drainage problem in the south garden is going to need attention before the deep freeze." "I'll have it looked at," I said. "I can do it," she said. "You are the Luna of CARWYN," I said. "I'm aware," she said. "Lunas can fix drainage problems." "I suppose they can," I said. She looked at me with a tilt that meant she found something considerably better than anticipated. "Good," she said. The moon seal at our feet was warm and steady. Old Sir was at the back of the hall, as he had been the day of the hearing, as he had been every morning on the river bank for 3 weeks. He had the bearing of an animal who has done what he came to do, and has no objection to being warm for a while. Ayne had arrived at CAERWYN with no name, no pack, no past, with nothing but the steady certainty that she was walking in the right direction, and the self-possession to keep walking. The seal had known her blood. The wolves had known before the seal. I had known before the wolves, in the way that you know things you cannot yet prove, that some people carry their worth so quietly that the world mistakes the quiet for absence, and that the world in those cases is simply wrong. She was Ayne of CARWYN. She had always been Ayne of CARWYN. The name she had chosen for herself, 3 years ago on a road she was walking toward home without knowing it, had been right all along.